Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. On today's show, we continue with Corran Horn's story. When his wife goes missing, Corran embarks on a year-long search. His journey sends him from Luke Skywalker's academy to joining a pirate gang, and finally, facing off with an Imperial warlord and her Force-wielding henchmen. It's I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. And joining me to talk about the book, it's friend of the show, the podcast's resident Canadian, Jay. Justin, how's it been? How are you? We haven't spoken in a few months.
It's true. Hi, Aaron. Welcome back. Glad to be back. Yeah, it has been a bit. I am doing good. I'm happy to talk about one of my favorite characters with you. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So I know we have to talk about Corran and I, Jedi. But more importantly, Justin, both of our favorite baseball teams struggled a little bit here at the start of the season. What is up with your Blue Jays right now?
Oh, that's a huge thing right now. They're not off to the greatest start. Um,
They weren't off to a great start last year and still made the World Series.
you know what? They can only go up from where they are right now because they've had some major injuries right at the start of the season with some of their, you know, the big pitchers that they brought in. Some of our stars have gone out. I'm actually really sad that the latest pitcher, who's a giant Star Wars fan, um, didn't even get to pitch a full game. He was out in 2 innings and blew his ACL.
Oh,
So he's had to go for surgery, and so he's out for the season already.
that's terrible.
And, yeah, I was getting really excited because, like I said, he's a big Star Wars fan. When he was playing in, I think it was Korea, his jersey was 30, and his initials are CP.
C3PO.
Yeah, that's why he did it. And when he came to the Jays, his number is 66 for Order 66. Yeah, so little meshing of baseball and Star Wars here, but yeah, I'm kind of sad that we really didn't get to see him. How about the Orioles? I know they're not doing too well either.
No, I mean, they've started off a little better than Toronto, but they are still not playing up to the talent of the players they've brought in. A lot of
Hmm.
the people they've brought in have struggled at the beginning of the season.
Yep.
It's different playing with a new team.
Yeah.
There's different parts of your daily routine that you have to get used to. And right now, I'm chalking it up to just everyone is adjusting to a new team, new city, new division. I mean, we all know the AL East, generally the strongest division in baseball. Some of the signs have improved over the last 7, 8 games. So
That's good.
I'm a bit optimistic. But yes, as of right now, the team has not started off as well as I would have liked.
The Jays are kind of the same way. Like we're starting to see some of that offensive power that they have, but they're still making some big mistakes. And listening to the game yesterday, I was actually kind of surprised to hear the AL stats period because even though the Yankees got off to a great start, their record's really not great either. Like the
Well, they just
entire
lost 5 in a row.
Yeah, like the entire division seems to be struggling right now. So that gives me hope.
Yeah. Jay, your wife told me just before the season started that I still have to come up and visit Rogers Center sometime. Now, I can't this season. We've got some home renovations going on this year, a little expensive. But I think I might be able to make it work next year. We'll
That would
see
be
when the 2027 schedule comes out and when Baltimore visits Toronto, but maybe I can join you and Beth at a game.
Oh, absolutely. We would absolutely make that happen. We may even bring Thor and Loki.
Oh, I'd love to meet him.
So, but yeah, if we'll definitely talk and make that plan and make it happen. And hopefully, in a couple of years, when I Camden Yards has actually been a place I've wanted to go for years. I just think the stadium has a pretty cool vibe from what I see on TV. So, you know, I'd love to return the favor and come down there and watch that game.
Sure. It is a I haven't been there in a couple years actually, but it is a beautiful ballpark. Well, Jay, I think the listeners probably want us to get on with starting the podcast. So let's go ahead and start with a listener question. Today's email is a fun question, not a typical one that we would get. It comes from Liam. Liam asks, if Godzilla from the Monsterverse was on the side of the New Republic during the Yuuzhan Vong War, what do you think would change? Well, thank you very much for the question, Liam. Jay, as the guest, I'll let you answer first. How do you think the Yuuzhan Vong would have reacted if they had run into Godzilla on Coruscant or Yavin 4 or some other planet in the New Republic?
I think it would actually be terrifying because I think they would actually try and take it and manipulate it into something closer to their standings, kind of like they did with the micro beasts.
Yep.
Right. They made it their own and made it more terrifying than what it was before. And when I saw this question, it also reminded me of the Clone Wars and the Zelo Beast, which was kind of like the Godzilla monster of Star Wars. And that thing had a pretty impenetrable hide.
Yep.
So I'd kind of be terrified what the Yuuzhan Vong could do to it with their knowledge of creatures. And I think it would actually be, it may start on the side of the New Republic, but I think it would very quickly become a weapon used against the New Republic.
That's exactly what I think would happen. First off, I think the Yuuzhan Vong will be in awe of it, because what is it? They don't like any sort of artificial technology. Here is this great, awesome beast who is able to shoot out this atomic breath all by itself.
Yeah.
I think they would see it as some sort of creature that their gods deemed they should liberate when they came to the galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think somehow they would, send one of their weird mind-altering bugs or whatever, and it would somehow worm its way into Godzilla's head, and they would figure out a way to control it. And unfortunately for our heroes in the GFFA, I think all of a sudden now you're fighting against Godzilla.
Yeah. Like, could you imagine what the Shapers would do if they got their hands on Godzilla? Like, I'm not even talking just as Godzilla. They figure out how he does his atomic breath. That's a new weapon for their ships.
Exactly.
Like, that's a game changer, and it's actually terrifying.
And they can use his DNA to mix with the DNA of the different creatures that they control. And now you have some of the, thud bugs or Yorick coral organic ships that now can shoot the atomic breath out rather than just using the gravity weapon of the Dovan Basals.
Well, and even like the warrior cast, right? We know that they use like poison, like creatures that spit poison and stuff like that. Think about a Jedi in a fight that with a warrior that can now shoot that atomic breath.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. Like, honestly, like I think someone could write a horror novel about that.
Yeah. Liam, thank you very much for the email. I don't know if Justin and I answered it the way you wanted us to answer, but I think both of us are on the same page that, unfortunately for our heroes, I think if Godzilla would have been in the galaxy far, far away when the Yuuzhan Vong showed up, eventually he would be on the side of the Yuuzhan Vong. Listener, if you'd like to ask me a question, you can send an email to swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Twitter at SWLegendsLounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, you can record it and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Now, coming up at the end of the show, Jay and I will share an email from Colin, who's a big fan of today's book, I, Jedi. You want to stick around for that. But now it is time for us to talk about I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. Jay, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, listener, grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge.
The story begins after Rogue Squadron ambushes a pirate gang. Corran Horn returns home to Coruscant to sit down with his wife Mirax and finally have a long talk about starting a family and having kids. When Corran arrives at their apartment, Mirax isn't there, but she left a note saying she will return to Coruscant within a day. When Corran goes to sleep, he begins to dream. Mirax screams his name, and Corran wakes up terrified. Corran doesn't know what's happening, but he's certain about one thing. Mirax is gone.
Corran learns that Mirax was helping New Republic intelligence into searching for Imperial Admiral Leonia Tavira to find where her Star Destroyer Invidious is hiding and the pirate organizations who are working for her. General Aaron Kraken can't give Corran any information about his wife's disappearance, so Wedge suggests asking Luke Skywalker. When Luke probes Corran's mind, the Jedi Master discovers that Corran's memories of Mirax have been attacked. Only a Force user could have done that. Luke says that in order for Corran to rescue his wife, he needs to begin training in the Force. Reluctantly, Corran agrees to join the Jedi Praxium on Yavin 4, but not before he changes his hair color and appearance. Corran doesn't want to take a chance that whoever is holding Mirax will learn that he's at Luke's academy. So Corran Horn goes into hiding, and Kieran Halcyon is born.
Kieran joins Luke's first class at the academy. He trains alongside Cam Solusar, Brackus, Streen, and Tyone. He also forms a bit of a rivalry with Luke's most powerful student, Gantoris. The two men are talented fighters, and even though Gantoris is much bigger and stronger, Kieran beats the big man in a drill with training sabers. But Kieran flounders with other exercises. When Luke teaches the students how to lift a pebble, Kieran is the only one who can't do it. In fact, he struggles to move anything. It's frustrating. Kieran believes he's falling behind the others until, instead of a pebble, Luke asks his students to lift a large boulder. And Kieran volunteers. He closes his eyes and opens himself up to the Force. And miraculously, the boulder rises 2 meters into the air. The Jedi students are amazed at the large stone floating in front of them. Kieran opens his eyes and sees nothing. The boulder is still on the ground. Kieran's confusion shatters the illusion. When the other students ask what just happened, Luke says that Kieran just took his first step into a larger world.
Kieran also discovers another talent, energy absorption. In an underground grotto, Luke has the students float in a pool and extend their feelings out into the universe. As the class floats, a bubble of superheated gas is released from deep underground. The students scramble up out of the water, but Tyone slips and falls back in. She's about to be boiled alive, but Kieran absorbs the intense heat into his own body. He then releases the energy to finally use telekinesis and lifts Tyone to safety. Luke tells Kieran that there were only a few Jedi who could absorb energy the way he did, but one of those who could was Kieran's grandfather, Nijah Halcyon.
few days later, Kieran hears a scream and jolts awake. He runs through the halls of the Great Temple and finds Luke and the other students looking over the charred body of Gantoris. Luke says that the man was killed by the dark side of the Force. Kieran investigates and discovers an ancient Sith Lord named Exar Kun used to live on Yavin 4. Kun was defeated by a group of Jedi Masters, but his body was never recovered. A few weeks later, Luke welcomes another student named Kip Duran. Kip is even more talented than Gantoris, but he also falls under Exar Kun's influence. One night, Kip puts Luke in a force coma. He steals a super weapon called the Sun Crusher and wipes out the planet Cardia, the home of the Imperial Training Academy.
Han Solo goes after Kip to stop the angry young man. Meanwhile, Exar Kun tries to kill Luke while he lies incapacitated. Kieran takes it upon himself to destroy Kun's temple while the other Jedi students protect their master. However, before Kieran can blow up his temple, Kun offers him the power to defeat the Invid pirates and rescue Mirax. Kieran refuses, and the Sith Lord tortures him, breaking his arm and ribs. He shows Kieran a vision of Mirax dying, blaming Kieran for not saving her. Kun leaves Kieran broken and goes to the Great Temple to kill Luke. But the other students defeat Exar Kun, banishing the Sith Lord's ghost forever.
In the aftermath of Exar Kun's defeat, Luke allows Kip Duran to return to the Jedi Academy. Kieran is disgusted by Luke's decision, and he tells the Jedi Master he can no longer stay at the Academy. Corran Horn leaves Yavin 4. He ditches the Kieran Halcyon identity and visits his adopted grandfather, Rostak Horn, on Corellia. Rostak tells Corran about Nija Halcyon, his real grandfather. Nija died saving a village from a dark Jedi at the end of the Clone Wars. After his death, Rostak hid all of Nija's effects, including a set of data cards containing information about Corellian Jedi.
Corran adopts a new identity, Genos Idanian. He infiltrates the Invid pirates on the planet Corcus, becoming a pilot with Rock Squadron. The problem? The Rocks are the lowest of the Invid fighter squadrons. If he wants to catch the attention of Leonia Tavira, he needs to make it up to Bolt Squadron. Now, it takes a few months, but the Rogue Squadron ace is promoted to lead the Bolts. Soon after, during a pirate raid of a Ka'amasi colony on the planet Kiralt, Corran stops some of the Bolts from killing a defenseless Ka'amasi named Eligos Akla. Eligos becomes Corran's servant, and after Corran tells the Ka'amasi his secret, the two set about taking down Tavira's organization.
Corran attacks the different pirate groups at night. He uses the Force to show them visions of the Jedi monster hunting the Invids. Quickly, the Laser Lords, the Fast Blasters, and the Black Star Pirates flee Corcus. Then Corran sets his sights on Shala the Hutt's organization. Unfortunately, his ability to affect the minds of others doesn't work on the Hutt. Shala booby-traps his own hideout and tries to blow up the Jedi Hunter. But Corran absorbs the force of the explosion and uses it to create a cyclone. He uses the vortex to vacuum up the flames and debris, sending it up into the atmosphere, saving the neighborhoods surrounding Shala's lair.
Admiral Leonia Tavira arrives on Corcus with a surprise. When Corran heads out on another midnight Jedi run, he's confronted by 5 mysterious Force users brandishing lightsabers. It looks like the end for Corran when a 6th lightsaber appears in the darkness. A green lightsaber. It's Luke. Together with Corran's Rogue Squadron wingman, Oral Kurg, the three New Republic heroes defeat and capture the Force users. When Corran and Luke question the prisoners, Corran learns that they call themselves Jensari. Their leader, called the Sarai Kar, is helping Admiral Tavira in exchange for the protection of their world, Susevfi. They say that Mirax Tarek discovered the Invidious at Susevfi. When the Jensari captured Mirax, Admiral Tavira wanted them to execute her, but the Sarai Kar refused. She told Tavira that she had had a vision of someone called the Halcyon, who would bring destruction to the Jensari, but they would hold Mirax as insurance against him.
Corran, Luke, Elagos, and Oral head to the Susevfi to rescue Mirax. Inside the Sarai Kar's lair, Luke single-handedly defeats the remaining Jensari, while Corran, Elagos, Coral neutralize the other defense forces. They find Mirax and awaken her from the hibernation she was put under by the Jensari. After the rescue, the Sarai Kar says the Halcyon killed her master. When the Empire began hunting the Jedi, she went into hiding. As she got older, she took it upon herself to hide other Force-sensitive children on Susevfi and teach them the ways of the Force. Elagos tells the Sarai Kai that what she did was noble, but she doesn't know the entire story of what happened to her master. The Kamasi then shares the memory of what happened at the end of the Clone Wars with the Sarai Kai and Corran, of the battle between her master and Nija Halcyon.
Admiral Tavira prepares the Invidious to bombard Susevfi when Rogue Squadron and the errant Venture arrive in system. The reinforcements are welcome, but they're no match for a fully operational Imperial Star Destroyer. As Tavira's forces prepare to engage, Corran reaches out with the Force. He gives her a vision of another New Republic capital ship arriving. The Superstar Destroyer Lusankia, accompanied by a fighter squadron of Jedi warriors. In the vision, Tavira sees Lusankia launch the Sun Crusher, and the tiny superweapon begins streaking toward Invidious. Confused and terrified, Tavira orders Invidious to retreat. It jumps to hyperspace and disappears into the outskirts of the galaxy.
With Mirax saved and Tavira on the run, Corran leaves Luke and officials with the New Republic to deal with the Jensari. The Jensari aren't evil. They've just been isolated, and their education is incomplete. Luke says the Jensari are welcome on Yavin 4, where he offers to complete their Jedi training. The story ends with Corran telling Luke that he won't be returning to the Jedi Academy. For now at least, he plans to rejoin Rogue Squadron and start a family with Mirax. But he asks Luke for permission to do one last thing before he goes. Corran then hops in his X-Wing and flies to Exar Kun's temple. He fires his lasers and proton torpedoes, turning the ancient Sith Lord's lair into a smoldering ruin.
Time to take a break. When Jay and I return, we'll talk more about Jedi. I'm Aaron Moats. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But allow me to recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Cataclysm continues the story of Phase 2 of the High Republic. The fighting continues between the worlds of Iram and Arano. The Jedi think the situation is being manipulated by a mysterious group called the Path of the Open Hand. The Path claims the Force should be free to guide all peaceful people in the galaxy, but Jedi Knight Gela Natai believes the group's leader has a much more sinister plan to grab power for herself. Will Gela unravel the mystery before the path turns the galaxy against the Jedi Order? Find out in Cataclysm by Lydia Kang. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. And today, Jay and I are talking about I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. Jay, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because you are a bigger Corran Horn fan than I am. I think you like this story more than I do. So I want to give you the floor here. What are your overall thoughts about the book, and how did this book help shape the character of Corran Horn, particularly between the fighter pilot we first see in the X-Wing books and the Jedi that we eventually see further along in the Legends timeline?
Well, everyone's got to have an origin story, so this is kind of his. Um, One of the things I loved about this book, and even when the first time I read it, I actually loved that this whole book was from his perspective. In a way, it almost felt like a journal entry, but it was his experience. And I know when we talked about the New Jedi Order and the Legacy of the Force series, there were times where all of us that were reading it were like, I want to know what this character's thinking when they did this. And we got that in this book, right? This is all Corran's perspective. This is all his self-doubt. This is all his reasoning for why he did things. And right or wrong, this is his story. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about this book.
If you could pick out one or two things in this book, what were your favorite couple of things in this story?
So I liked kind of the insight to the start of the Jedi Temple and Luke trying to teach what he knows. I actually really love that they gave Corran problems with the Force, where he's not proficient with telekinesis, but he is proficient, in creating visions. He is proficient in absorbing energy. And I think I really like that aspect, because I think this is one of the things that we see sort of in modern Star Wars now, where the Force is generally the exact same thing for everybody. And I feel like with Corran having, I can't do this, but I can do this, I think it just adds a little bit of flavor to the universe, the legacy of the Jedi, the Force. I like that they talk about the Corellian Jedi like they're their own sort of unique Jedi order within the order. And again, it's just, I think by having different peoples from different worlds have different connections to the Force just really makes it feel more alive, right? It's not everyone's the same thing. Everyone gets the same benefits out of it. And honestly, when one of the coolest things, I think, when he made that cyclone and funneled it and created a giant Jedi in the sky with the cyclone and fire being a lightsaber, like that gets right back to when we saw the lightsaber from the Star Destroyer in the New Jedi Order.
Yeah, it's a cool visual. It's a cool visual.
Now I can also say that one of the things that, and I don't think I realized this when I first read the book, is the sort of time jumping that happens in the book. Most Star Wars books tend to be pretty quick in their timeline.
Yeah, at most they generally are like maybe a couple weeks.
Yeah, and as Corran, who is essentially a police officer before Rogue Squadron, before he's a Jedi, who does investigations and has been in deep cover that was actually one of the things that drove me nuts about this book when I read it this time, that he didn't use those skills right off the bat.
Mm.
um, so the timeline of, his wife's missing for a year with, and he's like, but I don't know what to do. It's like that was your job.
Right.
So so for me, that part kind of um, took a little bit out of what I remember liking about the book, but overall, I think it was just a smaller, more nitpicky thing on my end.
There are 3 or 4 times in the story where either Corin or his grandfather Rostek or even Elagos will remind Corin of a saying that his father used to give him. When you don't know, it's something to the effect of, when you don't know who you are, look in the mirror.
Yeah.
If the book was written sort of as a memoir, I like your description of that, like it's a bit of a memoir. There are basically 3 or 4 distinct individuals in the book that Corin kind of assumes that he is. He forgets is not the right word, but
He loses himself.
right, he completely puts away the fighter pilot Corin Horn and becomes Jedi student Kieran Halcyon.
Mhm.
Then after that, he completely puts away the Jedi student and he becomes the pirate Genos Idanian. And then again, he completely puts that away and he goes back to the kind of Corsac undercover cop persona that he had years ago before he joined the Rebellion and the New Republic. And it isn't until toward the end, when he has the discussion with Elagos, that he realizes he doesn't need to be one thing or another. He's all of these things, and he needs to start acting as though all these things aren't different personalities. They're just Corin Horn. And when he starts accepting them all, that is when he can then he'll finally be quote unquote ready to save his wife.
Yeah, but I think that's a really real struggle for a lot of people.
Sure.
Um, and I think that's part of the reason why this book is here, is because it's trying to show that journey of, I was this, I was this, I was this. Can they all coexist, or is it I'm just defined by my job? I know in my job when I started, I really didn't show the nerdy side of me for fear of judgment. And the day that I kind of just put that aside was like a breath of fresh air. I started wearing superhero shirts under my uniform. I was reading comics at work. I was reading things more fantasy oriented. I was reading Star Wars books. And for me, when I was able to do that, because I had them sort of compartmentalized, for me, that was it was an awakening of, I'm both of these things at the same time. Could they have maybe done that a little bit better in this book? Yeah, but I think it was trying to show his progression of sort of his life, um, without actually having his whole life.
I think it's a journey that he has to go on.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the events of the Jedi Academy trilogy. We see them from Corin's perspective here. Of course, the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson was published years before I, Jedi, a few years before. So we see Corin as Kieran Halcyon, practicing and training with Luke's first class of students at the Praxium. He's there at all of the major events, but he's just off screen.
Mm-hmm.
He's not there when Gantoris first challenges Luke with the lightsaber that Exar Kun teaches him how to make. Corran is late that day, right? He's like late for training.
Yeah.
And he shows up toward the end of the lightsaber battle. Corran is asleep, and of course the bunk he picks is 2 levels down from where most of the students pick their living quarters. So when Gantoris is killed, Corran is one of the last ones, if not the last one, to make it in there. Corran is always just late when Kip Duran does something. So I can appreciate it to a point. For me, when it keeps happening over and over and over again, that's when Stackpole using Corran there with the first class and interweaving his story with the Jedi Academy trilogy, it starts to lose me when it's done over and over and over again.
I actually found it kind of funny. I love that he was integrated like that. I actually read in the acknowledgments at the back that Stackpole actually talked to Kevin J. Anderson. He talked to Timothy Zahn and a few others to really make sure that he got the characters from their perspective and that he wasn't doing them disjustice. I actually thought this was really, really funny that that first part of the book, he was always late. He was just missing out on everything. It actually reminded me of a Justice League animated episode called The Greatest Story No One Ever Knows. And it's Booster Gold. There's some big world battle happening, and Booster Gold is running through this city doing things, and you'll see like all of a sudden like Superman gets thrown through a building right beside him, right? And he's like, oh, like, hey, I need you for a second. And he's like, no, I'm busy, and goes off, right? So it really reminded me of that, where it's like there's this whole other thing going on, and he's doing his own story, but it's connected enough that he's there, but it's almost comedic. That
Yeah, it is.
like I thought that was funny. Like I think I think it's a nice poke. I think it's also a nice poke because Corran tends to be a very serious character in a lot of his portrayals. So I think the fact that he's always showing up late to these big events almost makes it better for his character.
Yeah, and again, I don't have an issue with the way that was written overall. I think for me, just it would be a little bit more of like a less is more type situation where maybe Stackpole didn't have to mention like every single event that happened in the Jedi Academy trilogy.
Yeah.
Maybe hit 2 or 3 and then have Corran leave.
But we also know that the Star Wars fandom likes to nitpick stuff like that.
Sure. And if he
Like-
wasn't there when these other things happened, they'd be like, well, why wasn't he there? He was there for
like,
these others.
And like we see that with the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith,
Yeah.
right?
Where's
Everyone's
Ahsoka?
like, yeah, where's Ahsoka? Where'd this character? She's so prominent. What happened? Right? So that would be the same thing in this book. You say he was there. Well, what was he doing?
Exactly. Now, one of the things in the book that I did like was the discussion/argument Corran and Luke have about Luke just allowing Kip Duran to come back to the Jedi Academy after he uses the Sun Crusher to destroy the Karita system. We see the law enforcement officer aspect of Corran saying, look, Kip has to pay some sort of restitution for doing this. I understand it was an Imperial world, but not everyone on that world is Imperials. They're just people living on the planet. They're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to Alderaan. They were just people living on Alderaan, and they were gone in an instant. But Luke takes Kip back. And I will say, I am on Corran's side in this. I have always thought that Kip Duran needed to pay some sort of penance more than what he did back in the old EU. What did you think about those scenes between Corran and Luke?
I actually thought it was great, and I agree that Kit needed more, um, needed to pay some sort of restitution. I mean, even when
He had to face some sort of justice.
even when Mara Jade's first introduced in this book, she kind of says she's there reluctantly because she doesn't know how other people are going to react to her, because a lot of people feel she hasn't paid enough restitution for the things she did as the Emperor's Hand. So we're already kind of given that we have characters there that have done bad things or questionable things, and their own character is saying, I probably should be held a bit more accountable. So for Luke to just turn around and say, yeah, I made an agreement with the New Republic and he's my problem. It's like, well, that's great. But Kip took another super weapon and leveled a world. Yeah, I think he need, regardless if he's been possessed by Exar Kun, there's still a part of him there, enough of him there that he has to take some sort of responsibility for that.
One cool thing, in my opinion, about Star Wars is even though those characters may be influenced or manipulated, in the end, they are still the ones who get to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
They can choose to ignore the influence that has been put upon them, or they can choose to go ahead. And yes, Exar Kun manipulated Kip's anger at his brother being taken away from him by the Empire. That still doesn't mean that Kip is judge, jury, and executioner for an Imperial world.
Yeah.
And I like that Corran says something to Luke about it. Because in one aspect, Corran is absolutely right. Every time Luke in the original trilogy and in the Legends continuity up to the point of this story being published, Luke always thinks of light and dark on a grand galactic scale.
Yeah.
When Corran and Mara have their discussion, they're correct. The light side and dark side are little things that happen every single day. And it's almost like Luke doesn't see the trees for the forest. You know, it's the opposite of not seeing the forest for the trees. Luke sees the entire forest. He can't see the individual trees.
Yeah. You know what? I actually loved when Warren called him out on that and said, you know, the way you approach the Force is it's the Emperor and Vader or it's Yoda and Obi-Wan. Yes, it's everything's a grand scale, right? And yes, Corrin's absolutely right of, hey, you know what? I've walked that line where I could have fallen and I veered away. It doesn't have to be this grand thing. You know, I do love that Star Wars, like, redemption is always on the table, right? But I think you need to work for it. I don't think it's, you know, just, oh, well, I say I'm good, so we'll prove it. Show your actions,
Right.
you know. And and again, I think that's one of the things I like about this, where Corran seems to really bring almost that human aspect to this character that is almost godlike with his power, the way he's revered, right? The way he's idolized.
Yes, Luke Skywalker is looked upon as the savior of the entire galaxy.
Yeah. And here you have, Joe Blow, regular, you know, cop, fighter pilot, soon to be Jedi, going, hey, man, like, people have tried to bribe me and I could have taken it, but I didn't because my morals and my ethics showed me that that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's flash forward to the second half of the book. Corran leaves the Jedi Academy. He goes undercover as Genos Idanian, and he infiltrates the Invid pirates. I think overall, I probably like the first half of the book a little better than the second, but some of the cool things that I did like in the second half of the book. I liked Corran's interactions with Elagos after he saves Elagos from being killed by some of the other pirates. I like the discussions they have about how they want to take down Tavira's organization from the inside, and that'll allow Corran to get closer to finding Mirax. And then Corran, the Jedi Hunter, I mean, let's face it, he just becomes Batman. That's what he is. He's Batman in this book.
Yeah, he kind of is. I think he's got a little bit more humor than Batman, but yeah.
Is that what you were picturing when you were reading some of these things? Like showing up in a dark alley and knocking off some pickpockets or not and scaring the crap out of some of the pirates to try to get them to leave?
I wasn't actually picturing Batman, but I was kind of picturing like it's it's almost like a trope where someone wants to be that hero and puts like, the hood on and you know and maybe this is just me, right? With him being late to all those big events in the beginning, and then here he is doing this stuff. I almost felt like there was times where like he was tripping over the garbage can and things were just working out for him.
So he's not Batman, he's more Darkwing Duck.
Yes. Right? Like I feel like some of the stuff that like you know, he couldn't have planned it and like I said, he went into the pirates back hideaway out of the bar, right? He had no idea what the layout was, and
No clue.
he just happens to open a door that leads outside. Like,
Yeah,
for all he knows, that could have been a closet or a washroom. And then he's like, he would have been standing there with his lightsaber going, can you show me the way out?
so Corran was the terror that flaps in the night.
Yes.
It was. You're right. He's more Darkwing Duck than he is Batman. But it works. It thins the ranks of the pirates. The vast majority of them leave Corcus. The vast majority of them leave Admiral Tavira's employ. So that when the Admiral does finally show up to Corcus, her forces aren't nearly as numerous as they were before Corran got there.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Like I actually enjoyed reading that that the Jedi Hunter and him slowly taking out the organizations and in typical pirate fashion they're very superstitious and he really played into that and you know they start going hey I'm not doing this, I'm out. Like, you can pay me all you want, you can come after me, I'm not dealing with a ghost Jedi. No.
And then because, let's face it, the most famous Jedi in the galaxy, and for the most part, the only Jedi that anyone in the galaxy has heard of, is Luke Skywalker. Corran starts convincing Tavira and the pirates that it is Luke Skywalker there that's terrorizing them. And they're like, well, wait a minute. This guy took down Vader. He took down the Emperor. I don't want any part of this guy.
Yeah.
I'm out.
And I think that's also one of those things where we almost because we're so used to seeing Jedi as the reader, and because that's who the stories focus on. I think it's very easy to forget that at this point in the galaxy, like in the timeline, Jedi are almost like myth. Like, you know, they all mysteriously disappeared after the Clone Wars, right? Even during the Clone War era, like people kind of don't like remember Jedi. It doesn't take very long.
If you listen to Obi-Wan in A New Hope, he says 10,000 Jedi Knights. The galaxy is full of trillions of people.
Yeah.
99 point, however many nines you want to put on the end of it, have never seen a Jedi in their entire lives. All they've heard are stories. And these stories, the folklore and legend behind the Jedi, I'm sure in some of the more remote areas of the galaxy, they are looked upon as these monsters
Hmm.
who wield magic and are able to do fantastical things rather than being peacekeepers and people who try to help bring justice to different areas of the galaxy. I mean, we got to remember, we the viewers, we the readers, we're the only ones that really know the Jedi. The rest of the galaxy doesn't.
Yeah. And I mean, even on this pirate world, how many people are just regular people on that planet? And now they see this giant Jedi figure with a flaming sword standing over a city, right? Like that's not normal,
It's terrifying.
right? That's not a story you're going to be like, hey, you know what? I saw a Jedi once and he was really cool. It was, no, he took up the entire sky and had a sword that was like half the size of the horizon.
Yeah, it's terrifying. So finally, they make it to Sesevfi, which Michael A. Stackpole, you wrote this for people to read. You did not write it for people to speak about. Some of the names you used in this book are extremely
Yes.
difficult to pronounce. The planet is Susevfi. For an
Yeah.
English speaker, that is not an easy planet to say.
No.
Susevfi, however you pronounce it. And we discover a new small group of Force users, the Gensari, however you pronounce that. These were Force users who, according to the story in Legends, at the end of the Clone Wars, one of the Masters, a Dark Jedi, was defeated by Nija Halcyon. The Dark Jedi's wife and apprentice decided to go into hiding on the planet, and she also decided to protect children that she discovered who had Force abilities. And they just hid out on this planet. Well, she was not completely trained. She's trying to train these children in how to protect themselves based off of an unfinished education by herself. What did you think of the Gensari as a group? And is it a group that you would have liked to have seen more of in Legends?
Yeah, I actually would have loved to have seen more of them. Um, I love the idea that they're in armor. I love the idea that their armor is not predatory animals, but ones that are more defensive. I think that makes it very unique. Again, and this is me with a lot of Legends EU stuff. Here's again that flavor of how different people interact with the Force, right? She took what she knew, as little Jedi training as she had, and tried to make it work as best as she could and develop this organization. I would have loved to have seen them as still keep that history, but I would love to see have seen one of them in the new Jedi Order wearing this animal armor standing up against the Yuuzhan Vong.
It would have been really cool to see one of them take Luke up on his offer
Yeah,
to go to the Jedi Academy and get a more well-rounded Force education.
yeah. Like, so I think in that regard, it was almost a missed opportunity by a lot of the writers that they could have used that and threaded that through the remainder of the series. But again, this is this is what Star Wars was. This is the Force in the EU, where different planets, different peoples have a different way of interacting and using it, but it doesn't diminish what the overall Force is, right? It just gives it more flavor. It gives it not the same thing, right? It gives interest.
So, as we wrap up the discussion here, two more things I want to hit. The first is Admiral Leonia Tavira. I do know she has a bigger part to play in a lot of the comics in Legends. I've never read those comics, but I do know she's in them. One thing you don't get a lot of in Star Wars, particularly in the old EU in Legends, are some more adult, intimate moments. I would say this book is a little more PG-13 than a lot of the Legends stories. Corran hasn't seen his wife in almost a year, but he can't help being attracted to Leonia Tavira. She realizes he's attracted to her, and there are a couple scenes where she uses that to try to get her way. I would say in the first one, she does a decent job of influencing Corran. The second scene we get that with, by that time, Corran and Elegos have already figured out the best way to outsmart Tavira, and that is to allow her to think she has the upper hand when she doesn't. But I liked the character, I think, of Tavira. I'm not going to say she's my favorite, but she's a little bit different of an Imperial bad guy than what we get in most of Legends. It's a lot different than some of the Imperials we get in canon.
Yeah. No, I actually like that. I liked her character. But yeah, she's a definitely a different kind of Imperial. Um,
It's almost like she's not an Imperial. I mean, yes, she is part of the Empire,
yeah,
but she 100% is out for number one.
yeah.
That's what she wants. She wants to advance her own power and influence more than anything else.
Well, I mean, I think every so we've seen Iceheart, we've seen Dala, and they tend to be very, very serious, like don't show emotion kinds of characters.
And they believe in the Imperial cause,
Yeah,
whatever that is.
but they still are generally out for themselves, right? Because they are trying to be the leader of the Imperials and rule them. Taveria is still trying to do that, but her personality is a lot more playful than Iceheart, for instance.
Sure. I guess the only thing I would disagree with is while I think you are correct that Izard and Dala want to rule the Empire and defeat the New Republic / Rebellion, I read Tavira's character is she doesn't really care about that as long as she can control her own sort of kingdom, her own little empire. I don't think she cares about the rest of the Imperials. I don't think she cares about the rebellion or the New Republic. I think she just wants to carve out her own kingdom in this galaxy.
I would agree with that, and we're kind of in that era where it's Imperial warlords, right? They're all trying
Correct.
to carve out whether they say it's they're trying to make the next empire. They're all just trying to carve out their own little empire to run to make them still feel like they're relevant and important.
Yeah. And I wonder if we're maybe going to see more of that in canon going forward with the Mando movie coming up and eventually with any sort of New Republic storyline
Hmm.
in Ahsoka, and if Filoni does his New Republic movie.
Yeah, it'd be well, I guess we'll find out shortly with Mandalorian and Grogu coming out and Ahsoka season 2 coming out.
Sure. All right. Last topic we want to hit before we start to wrap up the show. And I will admit, this is my big hangup with this story. And that's it doesn't seem to me that the character of Corran Horn would wait an entire year to find his wife, to go through all of these lengths of studying at the academy for a few months, of infiltrating the Invid pirates for months, because this story takes place over an entire year, and it just doesn't seem like the character would do that, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And like I said, when I read this back when it first came out, and the few times after that, I don't think I ever realized how long things took. This read through, that was something that was glaringly obvious to me. And I was like, okay, you're an undercover investigator. Why did it take you so long to use those skills to try and find your wife? Like I get his initial reaction where he's trying to get Kraken to tell him what he knows about Merrick's mission, um, and understand that of hey, operationally we can't tell you that because it could put other assets at risk. But even when he went to the Jedi Academy to train, I I almost feel that that should have happened in reverse, right? Where he started out trying to find Mirax with his detective skills, which then led him into the Jedi Hunter Invid stuff. Because I feel like if they had done it that way, he would almost be discovering his powers.
Hmm.
And then, and if they ended it at the Jedi Academy with all that stuff going on, now it's even more of a reason why he should be at the Academy,
Hmm.
right? And I think had they done it that way, it actually would have made more sense.
So he starts out trying to infiltrate the Invids, realizes that the skills and experience he already possesses isn't enough of
Yeah,
what he would need to find Mirax. I have to also embrace the Jedi side of myself. I need to learn new things. Then he goes to Luke's academy, learns those new things, and that's what allows him to finally discover where Mirax is being kept.
yeah. I think had they laid it had Stackpole laid it out that way, I think the story actually would have even flowed better.
Hmm, interesting.
But yeah, I agree that that was one of the things that was driving me nuts through this read through was why isn't he using the like his previous job experience? I mean, how many operations has he gone and found people? You know what I mean? Like that he's tracked down people. He's tracked down criminals, he's tracked down organizations, he's infiltrated them. Why did it take so long for him to go, hey, you know what? I should use those skills.
Right.
But I'm 100% with you on that one.
Well, since we're in agreement, let's wrap up the conversation about the book there. But before we sign off, I received an email from listener Colin, who is a big fan of iJedi, like you are, Jay. Colin's email was very thorough. I can't read the whole thing here, but I would like us to hit most of his main points. Colin says he really enjoys the first person point of view. He says that for him, the book serves as a memoir for Corran Horn or an excerpt from a larger memoir. That's very similar to the way you view the book, Jay.
Yep.
Colin continues, if it is a memoir, is Corran an unreliable narrator? Is he making his own actions more heroic than he really was? Maybe, maybe not. Colin says the literature analysis classes he took in high school and college make him think about that. He says that he likes the way Stackpole weaves Corran's story in and out of the events of Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy. While Corran finds himself off page for the big events of those books, his scenes interacting with the other students help flesh those characters out. Colin says iJedi also helps smooth over some of the different characterizations of Mara Jade. He says Anderson's depiction of Mara in the Jedi Academy trilogy always felt a little bit off from her characterization in other EU stories. In Colin's opinion, Stackpole helps bring her back into alignment for this time frame while also setting up her romantic relationship with Luke in Timothy Zahn's Hand of Thrawn duology.
Colin says his favorite part of the story is when Corran finally learns to merge the three aspects of himself: the Corsic agent, the fighter pilot, and the Jedi, to essentially turn himself into Batman and take down the Invid pirate gangs.
We think alike, Colin.
He spends his days as a drunk space pirate, then with the help of his trusty butler, becomes a Jedi vigilante on the streets of Crocus at night, protecting the locals from the pirates and criminals. Colin says he wishes we had more stories of boots on the ground Jedi making a difference and fighting smaller criminals instead of saving the galaxy. He also likes that Corran uses one of Han's false identities from the Paradise Snare, Genos Indidian, an anagram for Indiana Jones. I actually didn't know that.
I did know that. I think it's pretty cool that in the Paradise Snare, Han uses this identity to portray himself as a ship thief. And then when Corran wants to go undercover in this book, Booster says, well, here's an identity from a ship thief that I knew was out in the galaxy decades ago. No one knows what happened to him. He just sort of dropped off the face of the galaxy. But I have this identity, and I've even spruced it up a little bit with some extra things. So
That's fantastic.
I do remember that, yes.
That's fantastic. Colin says that even though this book was published before the prequel trilogy was released, and the Clone Wars depicted in the book don't jive with the timeline established in the movies, he finds it interesting how the shadows of the past influence the narrative and the themes of this story. Corran has a vision of his grandfather Nija's death. Corran rescues Elagos, the nephew of one of Nija's closest Jedi friends, and their final mission together is intertwined with the creation of the Jensari, the antagonists of the story, a definite will of the Force plot, as the different parts become interconnected as the story progresses. And while the climax does have exciting combat, the resolution ultimately comes down to discussion, understanding, and forgiveness of historical wrongs, which Colin calls a very Jedi-like solution.
Colin finished his email with about a dozen quick hits of his favorite moments in the book. The three that stood out to me are, number one, when Corran arrives at the Academy, the Force guides him to choose the room that Wedge, Biggs Darklighter, and Jack Porkins all bunked in before the battle with the first Death Star. Colin says it's a lovely little detail that goes a long way toward Corran's character development. Number two, Corran's relationship with his grandfather, Rostek Horn. Corran says he wishes he got more with the two of them together throughout the old EU. I will say, we didn't speak much about that, Jay. In my opinion, that was one of the cooler parts of the book. I really liked the interactions between Corran and his grandfather when he smuggled himself into Corellia.
Those were very interesting conversations, and I do agree that I wish we had more of those conversations in other books. I think one of the coolest things though is that Rostek figured out a way to hide information in plants.
In the flowers, yes.
Yeah, and would ship them to people he was threatening, people that he wanted to have information. I mean, wow, that blew me away when I read that this time. I don't think I remembered that from when I read it years ago. But man, that again, that's one of those things that I guess we have some shows right now that are kind of in that the Jedi are being hunted era. But man, could you imagine finding something like this
Yeah.
in the sequel trilogy?
Yeah. Rostek would have been a cool character to get more of in the old EU. Number three from Colin's email. Mirax's rescue is like a fairy tale. The hero and his friends storm the castle of the evil witch queen and save his beloved, ultimately waking her with a kiss. You are correct, Colin. For me, that moment, I gave a little bit of a side eye because that's just a little too on the nose for me. But I appreciate that you really enjoyed that part of the story.
Again, for me, it was just one of those kind of almost funny parts. Like, it's like Han saying, I didn't have time for anything else.
Right. Colin, thank you very much for the email. Jay and I had fun reading it over, and while I couldn't include all of it here on the show, it was really cool to go over the highlights of the book with what you wrote. So, Jay, it's now time to wrap up. Listener, if you'd like to contact the show, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Twitter at swlegendslounge. Send me your questions and comments. If you disagree with something Jay or I have said on the show, let me know. I'll read your opinion. And send me your favorite Star Wars character groupings. I love reading all the messages you readers send in. Jay, thank you very much for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, Aaron. Thank you for having me. I always have so much fun chatting Star Wars with you. Man, when I was reading these books like 20 years ago, I wish I knew you then. And, I was so much more into discussing Star Wars and knew all the little ins and outs of these books back then. But it's always fun. I love coming back, and yeah, it's great. And I love what you've done with this podcast, and you should be very proud of it.
Well, thank you. And listener, don't fret. Jay will be back later this year as we have one more big series to go in the old Legends timeline, the Fate of the Jedi series. We're going to be doing that coming up this fall and winter. So, Jay, you'll be back for that.
All right. I need to get myself those books. Start reading.
Listener, coming up on the next episode, we'll check in with Wedge Antilles as he begins to transition from Starfighter Commander to a more senior leadership position in the New Republic military. But can you ever really take the fighter pilot out of the cockpit? We'll find out in X-Wing Starfighters of Adumar by Aaron Alston. You can look forward to that episode coming out on May 1st. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge today. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in Legends.